Outa-space International Arts and Class Struggle Podcast. On this show, the role of the working class artist in the struggle. Comment and views from the space station, and music from Joe Solo, No Pasaran. So today we've got an interview with Joe Solo. Hi, Joe. How you doing?
All right, thank you, Rob. Good to see you.
Cool, man. Well, just to give a brief introduction of who Joe is, or who I think he is. I've only just come across him. We were just talking about that before we started. But he's a singer-songwriter, a bit of a poet, a broadcaster, and definitely a political activist, which is some of the things I want to talk to him about today. But also a washing machine engineer, I see, which I found a bit interesting on your website. So, I mean, that's who I think you are, Joe. Do you want to fill us in a little bit more, give us a bit of a background of who you are?
Well, that's pretty much it. Yeah, I'm a singer-songwriter who writes poetry, does some writing, mends some washing machines to keep a roof over my head, and tries to change the world one life at a time.
Excellent. Well, I mean, I came across you because you caught my eye with the online singing of your album, No Pasaran. And then I followed it up the other day to listen to your Never Be Defeated album by the Miners. And, you know, both of them really hit me. You know, I was impressed. Well, what I was most impressed by was what you were trying to get up to, you know. So it seems to me you have a unique sort of way that you do your music. You know, it's very political, but you're doing fundraising for causes and this kind of thing. So what is it? How do you go about being an artist? What's your take on it?
Well, that's a multi-tiered question, that, Rob. From a musical perspective, from a songwriting perspective, what I try and do is I try and write, I suppose, a little working class vignettes, I suppose, if you wanted to make it in posh language. I try and write stories of individual people rather than sort of big overarching overviews, because I try to connect people with politics through emotions. So if you can empathise with a character and sympathise with a character, you can get to the heart of the politics of that situation. But you start from a human point of view and you build upwards from there. So my songs are often people right at the heart of events that we know the history of, but anybody that doesn't know the history of is going to be able to identify with the emotions that person is going through and then find the politics from there. So I try to connect people to history through humanity, because we all have the same emotions, believe it or not. We all love and we all hate and we all suffer and we all despair and we all go through grief and we all go through every range of human emotions. The difference between socialists and non-socialists, I guess, is that if you're a socialist, when you open your front door, your love don't stop on your doorstep. You know, you carry on going, and your love extends to the whole of humankind, and your politics is framed in that. Other people maybe go through life a little bit more selfishly, and their love is for family and themselves and their friends, and it kind of stops on the front doorstep. That don't mean that they don't feel love. So it's just that it's limited compared to the rest of us, and that's your starting point. You can't think that everybody who don't vote your way or everybody who don't think like your way is evil. You know, it's just wrong. We just have different levels of the same emotions. So that's why I try and connect people emotionally to ideas, because I think if you've got that as a building block, it's a far stronger place to be. And and that's how you build a consensus of through human contact, human emotions.
Well, I was really interested. I mean, you said something in the Miners' Never to Be Defeated album. You were talking about ideas, and then the way you did it, you had your song, and it was nearer the end of the set. And I'm sorry, I don't remember the exact song, but you'll probably remember it in a minute. And you said that you were talking about the voice of the working class. Yeah. And you were talking about, okay, you've done your Come By Our voice in doing the chorus along with us. Yeah. And now I want you to do your punk rock voice, because and then you got dead passionate, and I loved it because you were saying that's what beats, it's the beat of a heart. It's not it was almost like you were saying that working class people, they feel things, we don't necessarily read great big books on theory and whatever. Well, of course we do. But it was that passion that you were putting in there that really resonated with me, because for me it's about ideas, so can you explain that a little bit more, what you mean by that kind of thing?
Well, yeah, the thing about the punk rock voice, that's really just trying to get people to reach inside themselves, break through the sort of like the shackles and express themselves, because that's how you raise enough noise to change things. That's a good thing on stage. It's funny, but it doesn't have to wear my throat out. But yeah, what I was getting across there was that we arrive at the same point. Some people arrive at it theoretically, and some people arrive at it emotionally. And working class people, by and large, know that the system's stacked against them, not because they understand the world through like a dialectical Marxist framework, but because they live and breathe the inequality every day. I go out to work, and I've just got enough to pay my bills, and just about got enough to keep a roof over my head, and just about got enough to carry on to the next day. And every day you're trying to wring as much dignity out of your day as you can, but all the time it's a constant battle just to stay alive, isn't it? You're treading water all the time. And when you look up, what you see is politicians, and it doesn't matter what colour tie they're wearing. What you see, by and large, with obvious exceptions, is politicians who are more interested in crushing than they are in stopping people being crushed.
Well, you mean like a dented shield kind of argument? Is that what you're saying?
Well, it's just that, for instance, right, if you study party politics, you can tell the difference between two manifestos. Right? But how many people study party politics? What people measure politics by is how well they're doing in their average lives, right, in a day-to-day existence. And working class people, by and large, because we're the victims of the system that exists, it doesn't matter who's managing that system at any one particular point, we feel the same struggle to get through a working day. And because we feel that, that manifests itself in what people hear on doorsteps. They're all the same. What's the point? They're all the same. It don't matter who you vote for, the government always gets in. And that, it might seem flippant and it might seem glib, and to us, or to a hardened political campaigner with all the notes in front of them and all the idiosyncrasies of a manifesto, that might seem like, these people, they don't think. But that's how it feels to be on the receiving end of the system. It doesn't matter who's in charge. You struggle to get through the day. You struggle to pay the bills. You struggle to keep a roof over your head. You've struggled to get your kids a job. And so that's what it's all about. That an instinctive politics. We know the system's stacked against us, and it doesn't matter who promises to change it. Nobody does, because they're a part of the same system that's crushing you. Until that system changes, we're going to be crushed by whoever.
Yeah.
And so what upsets me, I think, is this kind of like current sort of liberal sort of left idea that working class people aren't clever enough to know where to vote, aren't clever enough to do the. Yeah, okay, we might not be able to tick the books that they've read, but we feel politics. It's not knowledge. It's beating in your heart.
This is one of the points why I honed in on you and been watching you for the last couple of weeks, because for me, it's the same thing. It's about what's the role of a working class artist, or how should a working class artist feel? Or, as I did an interview yesterday, some people don't think they're artists because they're, and artists for some sort of middle class people who have got a fancy time. They've got time on their hands to do things and stuff like that. So, one of the essence for me, and one of the reasons to doing this podcast, is to talk about working class artists, and it's key. Because, I think that thing you're talking about, the feelings and all the energies and the stories that you're telling about the Spanish Civil War, but also the miners' strike, really, really hit home. And I think that's an important thing to say. But one of the questions I'd like to put to you is, what do you actually think the role of the working class artist is?
Well, you have to tell the stories that their histories don't tell. So the way I describe it is, it's our job to tell the stories that fall between the pages of the history books. You get taught kings and queens and generals history. You don't get taught working class history, because if you were taught working class history, you'd be dangerous. Right. Because you'd have the knowledge to see that it's cyclical, that we go through these struggles, that we get gains and it's taken off us, and we fight again and it's taken off us. And it's cyclical, and you only see that if you know your history, and the reason they don't teach it is because they don't want you to know that history, and it's our job to fight that, It's our job to tell these stories, to show people true heroes, people who fought and didn't get spotlights, didn't get wealth and riches, they fought their entire lives, and gained nothing in terms of the success that the middle and upper classes will gauge it as, financial success and fame. Our successes are inspiring people and trying to create a pool of knowledge that the next generation can use to fight their battles. It's like we receive a baton from one generation, we run our leg at a relay and we pass it on, and we just have to run that leg as best we can, and so that baton is packed with knowledge when you hand it over.
I mean, and this is one of the roles of the working class artist is to help distill our history, is to help explain it in a non-boring way, is to put it across, is to pass the baton on, all the things you talk about. One of the things I think, though, is maybe lacking, and I don't know what you think to this, is that artists are very good, and the working class movement has always had art and struggle all the way through it. It gets hidden under the weight of propaganda from capitalism. They don't want to show that our culture is really strong and powerful. But one of the things that strikes me is that the workers' movement doesn't always recognize the role of the artist. Would you say that's true, or would you say that it is part of the struggle?
I think it depends. There's certainly an element in there, not necessarily in the working class, actual working class movement, but certainly in the left-wing movement, but more towards the sort of like liberal left kind of angle of it, that you're just window dressing. The serious stuff is the speakers, and you're just window dressing. But if it's done right, the music helps the speeches, because you are able to communicate through music in a way that you can't with words. There's neither one's supreme over the other one. I'm not suggesting 4 singers could change the world, but in conjunction with one another, we can, words and serious actions from, from the great trade union speakers, people like Ian Hodson of the Bakers, great speaker, and so follow somebody like that with songs, it's like a tag team, and so there's a real strength to that. But often you find that you're the bit that goes on while they're folding up the chairs and folding the red flag away. So
sometimes it's an afterthought. I mean, I'm of the opinion that a lot of people understand it, but there's a significant amount of people on the left don't understand the role of art, or the power of it. And then sometimes it's underused, and different cultures express that in different ways. And one of the things this show is going to do is talk about, cultures in Spain and in South America and other places, but as two Englishmen, it's definitely something that I think is weak in the British labour movement, is this, the question of the artist. Would you agree or not? Do you think?
Yeah, but I think you're right. I think that it's almost like a reactionary thing among in England. That Rob Johnson has a great joke about it, the 100-year rule. You can't, as long as your subject's over 100 years old, people will listen to it. You can't sing about something that happened yesterday. Oh, not too soon, But yeah. But I think there's some of that. We'll celebrate somebody so long as they're dead and they weren't too popular.
Yeah, exactly.
But if you're actually out there trying to create stuff, there's possibly a suspicion too that the movement's going to carry you on their shoulders and you're going to sell them out.
Yeah, so and it happens.
It does happen. So there's possibly that suspicion too. It's not entirely the fault of others within the movement that artists get treated like that. It's often the fault of the artists too. That they do that. As soon as there's the first glimpse of a rung of the ladder, up they go.
Well, this sort of leads me on to my next point, really, because I think that often the ability to be an artist is almost impossible. Like you say, you're a washing machine engineer as well, and all my life I've been an artist of some description and a construction worker. And later on in my life, I've managed to blend the two in, instead of being a stone mate. I'm a stone worker by trade. And now I build monuments. That's one of the creative things that I do. But actually this idea that you can be an artist, you're allowed to be. And then sometimes when working class people get to that stage where they're actually making a living out of their art, that's when art gets turned into a commodity, and it's really hard for the artist to refuse, and therefore the working class artist gets stolen very quickly, and often because we do have the strongest feelings, we do have the biggest understanding of how the world is, often that sells records because it talks to the majority of the people or whatever the art form might be. So there's a problem there for us, I think, but one of the things that I think is important to say is it's one thing to be a political artist. It's one thing to be, a working class artist and the rest. But one of the things I think we lack is we don't organize ourselves as artists. I think we lack, a cohesive coming together. And one of that is because art can be very individual, and all the rest of it. There's lots of reasons. But one of the things I want to put to you is, how do you think artists themselves can get organized? How do they do it?
To be honest with you, I ain't got the faintest idea how that would happen. It's not that we're sort of like, individualists. It's just that the creative process is such a personal thing. And movements, artistic movements, are constructs of middle class intellectuals, aren't they? And of media. In the music scene of the 80s and 90s, as you'll remember, a whole bunch of bands that had never met would suddenly become part of a scene because the NME said so or the Melody Makers said so. And that idea of artists pooling together is kind of a construct of the system. We don't operate like that down here. I mean, with the We Shall Overcome movement that I helped start 5 years ago, we do have pools of musicians and we work together to help raise money and to help raise food and warm clothing and get it into grassroots communities and onto the front line of need. But artistically, we're not organised. Politically, we are. So it's. To organise artistically, I would say was nigh on impossible, just because the creative process doesn't work along those lines. You can organise in a factory because you're all part of making one thing at the end of the line, but artistically you're not, are you? Well, you're working at different factory lines, creating different products, so you're not in the same factory, So it's a lot harder to unionise that, and it's a lot harder to work in conjunction with one another, because the end products of our craft and our art is wildly different to anything else. So how do you put that on the same stage,
Well, I think this is a challenge to us, and I think, how capitalism is. It likes to put you in your place, and you get on with it. Thank you very much. One of the things that I think is lacking is this. Sometimes the workers' movement lacks a bit of creativity, yeah? And then if you look the other way, sometimes the artist movement lacks a bit of organization. I've been in many collectives, that sometimes are all over the place. And so it's like, how do we pull those two things together? And if we're going to change society, surely we need to, if artists are going to be some kind of leaders in the process, we need to get organized, don't we?
I'm not certain about that. I think rather than us being leaders in that process, I think we're catalysts. I think we help others to and inspire others to organise. I don't think it's our job to lead the charge. It's our job to be its soundtrack, to inspire it, to get hearts racing, and that's let
me pose it in a different way to you then. Okay. I was following some of your posts, and you talked about one of the great projects you're involved in, and you talked about a venue that was shutting down. Okay. I can't remember. I think it was in Barnsley. Maybe you can talk about that. But that's a phenomenon that's going on. Okay. So venues and places to play. We have the problem of pay to play. So, some of us, maybe you've been working the scene a long time. I've been working my scene. Maybe we're just about scraping a living, probably not, relying on somebody else doing a second job. But actually, most of the work we do is for free. And so as work, we're workers in that regard. So the venues are being closed down. There's pay to play issues that are massive. And then on top of that, we have the social problems that a lot of young people have, like they've got nowhere to go, they've got nowhere to do things. So for me, I agree with you that some of the stuff we do is catalystical. But one of the things that strikes me is there's a whole number of places where actually we have to see ourselves as workers, not as individuals, and I think this collectivization process it would be good for the workers' movement if we did that.
But my experience of collectives, music, artistic collectives, not political collectives. My experience of artistic collectives is to get filled with people who basically just talk and do nothing. And I am not built that way. I have ideas fizzing out the top of my head, and I try and put them into action there and then. And I don't do it because they're always political ideas and they're always for the greater good. I'm not doing it for personal gain. I'm not going, look at me, and I always involve as many other people as I can, people who I know and people whose skill set are going to match that particular thing. But I couldn't just sit there and every Tuesday night we'll go through the minutes of the meeting, and I'm just not built that way. And so, some people are, and I have the greatest respect for them. I'm not belittling that process at all. I'm just not built that way, and so I have to play to what my strengths are, and my strengths are basically that energy, that push, that let's all do this, and then having the sort of the friends and the energy to actually get that idea off the ground and make it happen. Because you meet an awful lot of people who say, I think we should do this, what are you going to do about it?
Yeah.
And I'm not that person. We're going to do this with that here. And so if in some ways you could say that's a right-wing thing though, Joe. Not you're just leading like a dictator. Not like that's not working with consensus. But then art isn't working with consensus, is it? Like Michelangelo didn't go. Do you know what? I'm going to hang upside down. What do all you lot down there think I should paint? Do you know? We'll vote on it. We'll vote on it. Like, who thinks I should do an angel? Do you know what I mean? That ain't the way it works. It's in our heads, and it's in some ways it is mental illness. In other ways, it's a great thing. But the creative process it doesn't like shackles.
Yeah, it's an interesting point. I mean, I think it's interesting because I'm not sure we agree on it, which I always like to find in an interview, because there's a lot of things I think you're doing are brilliant and great, and I really enjoy your shows. And then suddenly there's this issue, and I come across this argument a lot with artists, because I think we have to collectivize ourselves, not in terms of our art, necessarily. I mean, I think part of my art is becoming an organizer. I've been involved in many things, and without the art side with it. And for me, the art of building political organizations is a skill, and it's also it really brings home to me the question of what is art. It's like, is it somebody has to be musical or creative in some way, or is it something just that human beings always do? Is it a way that we solve a problem? Is it that kind of thing?
Different things. There's 3 different things at work there. You're right. Organising is a phenomenal skill, but it is a skill rather than an art. It's an ability some people have who just are born to be leaders, and can do that, and that's a fantastic thing if you can do it, and it's great, and it's an often underestimated skill. But it is a skill rather than art. The next thing, the creative process, part of it is art. And part of it is craft, because there's definitely, you're not. It would be a craft if you set off to make a chair, for instance. That's a craft, isn't it? It's a skill and a craft. But if you got some wood and you start building, the actual craft of using the wood and knowing what to do with the wood, that's craft. It's not going to end up as a chair as an artist. It's going to end up as somewhere completely unexpected at the end, and that's the art bit, if you know what I mean. So there's 3 different things going on there. The art, virtually impossible to organise. The craft, possibly. The skill you're talking about, massively important, and yes, you can organise that. So all 3, I don't know. But another project you did over in Spain was a mix of all those things, and phenomenal work it was too. And that took all of those skills and the political nous to fundraising and all the things that go along with organising people and getting a project through to the other side. That was brilliant. I would lack the bureaucratic skills to get that done. I wouldn't fill in forms. I have a mental block with forms. I wouldn't get past
anybody who's
that.
probably worked with me would probably say that I lack some of those things as well. I think it's sometimes the chaotic nature is inspiration and energy can carry you a lot further than necessarily having a well-written, good handwriting that remembers what time you're meant to be somewhere.
Yeah.
I think this is an interesting question between who is a worker and who is an artist. Why should there be a gap in that? Is my point. Because for me, when I came to those, I carried those 2 things. Well, I carried a couple of things on my life all my time. One was I was a worker. One was I was a political activist, and one I was an artist. And the art and the political activists had this hobbyistic existence, but they were me. They were my heart. They were everything that I felt. And then the other side was this guy who went to work and got some money, and that was the skill that you talked about, And so one of the problems I have with that is, why should I be organized as I was in UCAT for a little while? Yeah. Why should I be in that as a building worker and then not in the musicians union? Because, this kind of questions. And so I think, there's a tension there that as artists, I think we have to bridge. We have to find some way of saying, we're going to organize as well, not necessarily to do our art together. We do collective projects, but it doesn't have to be that you dominate somebody's art. In the same way as that's how we should be as human beings. We live in a neighborhood, we live in a factory. When we're in the factory producing stuff, how should we do that? Well, we should allow our energies and expressions to be able to create things better. So for me, socialism, art, and these kind of things, they're all intermixed.
Well, certainly, you can't really separate artist and worker. They're not. You are a worker. You're just doing a different kind of job. unfortunately, one that doesn't pay. I long ago gave up the idea that I would ever make any money doing this. I use what I do to make money for other people, and that's fine by me. I make my living mending washing machines. I'm a washing machine repairer by trade, so my union reflects that. I'm not in a musicians union because I don't make music for a living. They'd probably kick me out because I can't read it either. Trade descriptions would come in there. But no, if I made my living through music, I'd join the musicians union. If because I don't, I have another union, right? I see what you mean. In between, there's room for an organised, artist / workforce to be organised. What they aren't professional musicians, so the musicians union is really out of their league because you can't work and musicians.
Well, I joined the musicians union for a while, and it was a waste of time. I got a nice book.
I think so.
Yeah, I mean,
never been a member. I found it.
But I think that's a problem with unions in general, that quite often they're a waste of time. They're not a waste of time. They're essential for our class organ. I mean, the leaderships of them, what they do. I don't know that kind of question. And I think maybe there's some sort of bridge that we need to build between those two things. It's one of the things that drives me. It's something I think that we have to, that one of the things this podcast is going to be about. It's about posing to artists like you who are doing great work. You're putting yourself out there. You've got a bit of a following. You're doing great causes. You're bringing the workers' movement right into the middle of what you're talking about. You're bringing socialism right in the middle. But can we go further? Is my thinking on it? That's all.
At this stage, no, because we haven't persuaded enough people of the cause. We're at a strange place politically at the moment. We've got, in the UK, we've got a revolutionary right and a left that is trying to pull us back to the status quo. So we have no revolutionary left wing. And so it's very difficult to organise a working class movement when they're not seeing that reflected in any numbers in where they're looking. There's no movement. That's not to say we're not trying to start things down here, but we have to start at the grassroots, and we've got a long way to go. The first thing to acknowledge is that December 12th was a crushing defeat for the left. Anybody making excuses on that is in danger of making the same mistakes all over again. You can't write that off to one issue. You can't write that off to a lack of intelligence. That was a crushing defeat for the left, regardless of the rest of it. But we didn't do ourselves any favours. You've read your books, haven't you? So, Gramsci's idea of the establishment being a castle and the media and the police and what have you defending its ramparts and what have you. What Corbyn did was he lowered the drawbridge. And all the working class people outside saw him waving us in from the ramparts and waved back and got a T-shirt with him waving, and nobody crossed the fucking drawbridge. And that
it's an interesting way of putting it. I think.
I'm angry about that because I listened to him from the first days, and he was saying, "Look, it's down to you. I can take it so far, but this is down to you. This is down to the movement. This is down to you to tell me what you want, to bring the best of yourselves to this battle, or we're going to lose." And he said that clear as day, over and over and over and over again. And all anybody did was wave outside the castle. Oh, Corbyn's brilliant. He might let us in. We're in this situation now. We're in this situation now where we have, like I say, a revolutionary right wing, very insidious, very underhand, totally organised on social media and through the gaming system. And the rest of us on the left are still pushing pieces of paper across at each other in meetings. And we're
this is kind of my point about the role of the creative artist, eh? It's kind of my point. I mean, not that we don't need those meetings where we push paper across towards each other, but there's a weakness in our movement. And it's interesting. You brought up a whole load of things there. There's another podcast. I did notice a couple of weeks ago or months ago, you were saying, should I leave the Labour Party? Should I not? I knew a load of people rejoined. Obviously, I'm here, so I didn't rejoin or not rejoin, but I was watching that movement. I would have got straight in. They probably wouldn't have allowed me back in, that kind of history. It's a lot of questions there. One of the things I'm interested in, you're mentioning the need for a revolutionary left. We're coming maybe a bit nearer to the end of this podcast with you, but do you want to tell us a little bit what you think about what's needed with the revolutionary left? Because that sparked me a little bit. I'm interested in what you've got to say about that.
When I say that, I don't necessarily mean pitchforks down to Westminster. What I mean is, and we're trying to do this in Hull right now. We're trying to establish through the Hull and District Trades Council a trade union solidarity food bank at the Kurdish Community Centre. So it's basically a place where you can get union information, a food parcel, advice on this and that and the other, all the things you will need if you're really, really struggling. And through that interface, at street level in our communities, we want to try and build, again, from the grassroots, a movement. Because if not, our communities are going to get overtaken by the far right. The poverty that we're going to endure in the wake of COVID-19 is going to be such, and the Labour Party's deserted these states again. It's going to be a breeding ground for the far right. So unless our movement is on the ground in our communities, we're going to really struggle in the UK. And so we need to see that. We need to get ahead of history for once in our lives and actually be there when we need to be. And I've spoken to plenty of people trying to get these little things off the ground. If we can get this working, then perhaps the word will spread to other places, and we can demonstrate it working and a movement building. So when I say a revolutionary left, what I mean is grassroots, community level activists building such a movement that politics cannot ignore it. Party politics moves on numbers. Numbers alone. It only changes, it only adopts, it only compromises when it sees numbers. We have to make those numbers so significant that they can't ignore it. Now, this has been done loads and loads of times before. I know the system don't work in the way it is. The system, no matter who's in charge, is going to kill the planet. You can't get away from that fact. But at the moment, there's no point in banging your heads against the wall of the Labour Party in the UK, because it is now a middle-class liberal left entity that will not budge. So we need street-level, grassroots, socialist activists on the ground demonstrating real-life socialism, how it works, looking after people, helping them up, and not letting the far right in. If that's as far as it goes for now, then that's what it needs to do, because we cannot have those bastards taking over.
Well, Joe, I think that is a fantastic way to finish with you. I hope you'll come. I hope you'll come back, because I think you've opened up a whole load of things there I want to talk to you about. But I think that your last little poem that you just shouted out to us there, I think we'll finish on that note, because I think it's a nice way to close it down. So thank you very much, and look forward to speaking to you again, mate. Cheers. Thanks a lot.
Cheers, Rob. Thank you.
Okay, so welcome back up to the Outa-space station, where I'm up here with Paul Paranoid. Hey, Paul, how you doing?
Hey, Rob, how you doing?
Yeah, I'm good, man. I'm good. What did you think to that one, though? And what do you think to Joe Solo?
Well, that was a hell of an interview. Again, another great interviewee. Really enjoyed it. Thought it was a real juggernaut of an exploration. So much stuff. We'll never cover it all, so we'll just have to do our best to pick on the bits that really resonated with me and you. My first reaction was a very painful one, and I think you'll
painful.
Be with
painful
me on this.
In what way?
Yeah. Well, because I thought we cast our minds back to when you and I first started doing music, and we sort of I remember having this similar desire, although in slightly different reasons, wanting to affect social change through art. And hear Joe talk so passionately about it and be so committed to it was really heartening for a guy who's like now middle aged. You know what I'm saying? You know, like I remembered it, but I also grieved for my younger self listening to it. And I don't know if you felt that way as well.
Yeah, it's actually strange. I didn't say this to him because it's the first time I've met him. I was surprised we hadn't bumped into each other before. And actually, I didn't say this, but I was kind of jealous in one way because I think when I was before I met you, and when I was about sort of 17, I think I wanted to be the singer-songwriter type, you know, and never got that together. Obviously did some other things instead, but yeah. And I think what's really interesting about the way he does it, because it's really hard to write political lyrics, you end up sounding really shit really easily. And I think if you listen to his material, that's not how you feel about it, you know. So I found his form was really interesting, and how he approached stuff, and obviously all the ideas he was coming out with. So yeah, give me some more feedback then, Paul. Give me some feelings from it.
Well, if I mean, first of all, touching on the song thing very briefly, I think he does it the classic old way of doing it with song, stories, almost like a folk tale type approach. And I think that's there's such a great tradition there, and it reaches deep into. It's a very working class thing, folklore, folk music. Obviously, you've got Dylan's version of it. I know that's the go-to sort of obvious example, but you can't help but think, oh, I see. You know what I mean? He's reaching back into the past to tell stories about modernity and modern issues and stuff, as well as the past at the same time. But you know, I remembered that part of my, and we'll get into the body of what he was talking about, but the part of my sort of grief about it was I remember that when we set out doing what we were doing, getting people to go to gigs was such a massive uphill task before we even got anywhere near addressing any kind of social issues or change that we wanted to affect. And in fact, actually for us, I think, Rob, and not to make it about us, but just getting a music scene together wasn't the end the political act that we actually did, just to have a forum for people to be expressive.
I mean, it's interesting you say that. Actually, what he finished on, I think, is what I'm starting on. That he talked about, and it's touching on what you're saying. He talked about building a movement from the grassroots up, and I think, you know, our experience working together 25 years ago, trying to do that. Yeah. You know, and that's what he's talking about here. He's talking about, okay, here's all the grand ideas, telling stories, going about it, you know, fighting the system, etc., etc. But actually, the conclusion was, we've got to get out there and build in the communities. And I found, for me, that was the heartening thing. You know, that was the positive message that he was coming out with. And that's the bit, you know, that was ringing, well, it wasn't ringing grief for me. It was ringing sirens of action, if that's the right word to
Yeah, I mean, I loved it, but I was grieving for my younger self, not for him. You know what I'm saying? Like, for him, I felt nothing but, go, Joe, go, you know, like, just go for it. And I'm just glad that he's being heard, that there's a moon around him, that there's a little bit of jealous maybe, that like, ow, go for it, you know. But like I say, kid, let's patronise the man. You know, he spoke incredibly passionately and insightfully. I felt at points that I wasn't really fit to comment on a lot of the stuff he was saying. But what I have done is I've looked for the parts of what he said that fired for me, and I decided to concentrate on those. Okay,
so give us a bit of analysis then. What do you think?
Well, I'll tell you what. I'll run through a very brief list of them, and then I'm going to stop on the one that really stopped the traffic for me.
Okay.
I mean, basically, there was some amazing stuff between you two. Your conversation about the working class artist and what happens when the working class artist gets success and goes down the route of materialism, which I think we've seen both with stuff like obviously punk rock, and then of course latterly and more evidently really with hip hop and rap and stuff like that. Like, people come from the street, they come from this sort of very sort of poor background. But of course, immediately the whole point of, I remember like Ice-T famously once said that when people criticised him for not, you know, for leaving his roots behind, he said, you don't think when I was hustling and, you know, doing drug deals and getting into like stick-ups and stuff and rapping, I was doing all that to stay down there, did you? And I thought, God. And in a way, he touched on that, and that it absolutely hits on a real issue, right? I don't even know where to go into. I'm not qualified to talk about it, but I thought, God, that's a whole podcast on its own, right there. We could really get into that. There was that. There was. There was. I think I'll jump to the main thing. The main thing that really got to me was he made this wonderful quote: "Artistic movements are a construct of middle-class intellectuals." And at that point, I was kind of
talking specifically about NME journalists creating scenes, wasn't he?
Yeah, I remember the context. Although I thought as a line, it was just a terrific line for stimulating conversation. I was just fascinated, and he was so concise. He just hit it. He just sort of said it as an afterthought. I'm stopping the interview, rolling it back, and going, "Let's have that again." You know what I mean?
Yeah, let's talk about that. Yeah.
Yeah. No, please. Yeah.
Okay. Let's get into it a bit then, Paul. Let's get into it. So, middle class constructions of artistic movements and stuff.
I mean, so let's contextualize it, like you were saying. I believe the context was. Oh God, what do I remember? There was a. I think you were asking a question about organisation of art and stuff like that, and the difference between organising politically and organising artistically, and he was kind of like, I think, taking you to task a little bit on that and saying that he thought that organising politically was X and organising art was Y, where Y was almost impossible actually, because it's not democratic.
He talked about the difference between craft and skill and art and these kind of things.
Yes, beautiful.
Well, he made those points later, but it's the same point.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think he was, and of course he made the point beautifully that art isn't democratic, which is really interesting and something that I think we could spend a lot of time on, because sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't, but usually it isn't.
Well, what about this middle class construction thing?
Indeed. So that was the context, and then he said artistic movement construct of middle class intellectuals. And I think the example that was in play was that like bands will all be doing their own thing, and in the case of pop music, something like the NME or the Melody Maker of the time would come along. I don't know if it still happens, and they would suddenly sort of decide that Britpop was going to happen or whatever. I think that actually is more complex, that particular example, but nevertheless, they'll get on the bandwagon of something like that, or they'll push Suede forward. We're really showing our age here. Push Suede forward as the band of the moment. And then all these other bands that were actually all just individual beings, like individual entities, like Sleeper and Elastica, more obviously Blur and Oasis, and all these bands were suddenly put into this set, which was going to be Britain's answer to the grunge movement, which is Britpop. And suddenly you've got this completely artificial, created scene, when actually what we had originally was young people, young artistic people, and a lot of them working class or lower middle class, just doing what they would be doing anyway. But suddenly it's a movement. And who decided? The middle class intellectuals.
I think it's interesting because it's a bit like a constructed fashion. It's a bit like, some fancy fashion designer goes into it and makes up the fashion for this summer, which then ends up in all the supermarkets or in all the fashion shops at different levels. And it's a little bit like saying, it's about the commoditization of music, isn't it? It's about like saying, okay, here's some really interesting stuff. We put it in this aisle for you to buy. We put it in this this colored package for you to buy. And that's a bad thing, yeah? Or is that a good thing?
I think you know what I think it is. I'll tell you what I actually think. I actually think these dirty bastards come along when other people are being extremely creative and artistic and decide that they're going to qualify it.
Right.
That they're going to almost be part of it by qualifying it. Like they're and here's my 2 cents. And the only good thing is at least it gives them an excuse to put Sleeper or whoever it was. I love Sleeper; they're a fantastic band. On the front page of the NME or the Melody Maker, at least it was that. Or I mean, look at that. Or Justine Frinton's fantastic band Elastica. Suddenly, that's 2 bands with like really powerful female-led bands. Elastica is almost entirely female. Which so suddenly, at least it's useful. in that sense. It's packaging it. But I think actually, tell me if I'm wrong, I think that they are seeing themselves as having power and then deigning sort of like to, shine the lighthouse light of their publication on the sheer creativity of these extremely talented individuals that have managed to press themselves upon the music industry.
You know what I think we're talking about here? We're talking about in a particular sector of art creation. We're talking about music in particular here because it's a really obvious one, but it happens in all the others. But we're talking about ideologies, I think, and where creativity comes from and who exploits it. In the same way as, it's a bit of it. This is a simplistic thing to say, but it's a bit like, we go out and make all the goods in the factories or in life.
It is.
And then
it's a Marxist problem.
It's a Marxist analysis, at least, and then and then you end up having to buy, it gets packaged in the way that they want to package, and that's how they like to put it together for us. And really, what we're talking about here is, a bit of a clash of ideologies, and I think in music it's quite clear that you get like subversive, get the right word. You get subversive sort of trends that
maybe
break
it's
out.
both, Rob. Maybe that's an interesting mistake you made there. Maybe there's something submissive and subversive.
Well, yeah.
I don't know.
Submissive's always a.
Let's have a look at that another time.
But what I'm really going at here is that. When something fresh comes out, when it's from the street, when it's from the working class communities, when it sells, when it sells, not in terms of money, but in terms of sparking in young people's heads. Oh yeah, that's singing about me, or oh yeah, that rhythm's got me going. Something like that. What capitalism does in its commoditization of things, it takes that, puts it over there, takes out the dangerous part of it, because he was talking about history as well, if you remember, and he was talking about working class history, and one of the roles of artists was to fill in the gaps, because if working class people actually knew all their history, they'd be dangerous. And I think what happens here with these this sort of battle of the ideologies, or taking edgy artistic material and then making it something acceptable, but it still sells, until they ruin it, basically. And then, then they rehash it again, and then we buy the greatest hits of the scene that you decided that existed, so
actually,
I don't know.
I'd love to throw something. Sorry, am I cutting in?
No, go.
Well, interesting. I think I've got a little story. I know we're reaching the end of our time here, but I've got a little story just to join in with that. And I don't know if it's relevant or not. It seems relevant to me. I went through a phase just recently. I know we've done all of this, by the way, because when we were doing music as well, with reference to the 90s, we did a lot of talk about the bands and the Britpop thing and this commoditization of young people's genuine creativity by the powers that be, in inverted commas. And I remember that it was an interview with Louise Weiner from Sleeper, and she was saying they were finishing their second album. I think they only did 2. It was one of those wonderful hit and run pop careers, which if they shine really brightly, they shine half as long or a fraction as long. And she was saying they were recording in the same building as Robbie Williams, who had just decided to adopt the kind of Britpop approach. And people may not remember, but he did a single called Lazy Days, which I actually quite like, I have to say, where he really does sound a bit like Oasis or somebody like that. But the track he was working on, he asked them, he actually did this, he said to them, will you come down to the studio and listen to my new track? I want an indie band. Check it out. I want an indie band to come and give me their opinion, their seal of approval. And he played them Angels. And before he played it to them, he said, I think this is an 11 out of 10. And he played it to them. And Louise Weiner, to her credit, graciously said, and of course it was an 11 out of 10. But I remember thinking, oh God, if Robbie Williams and the like have got hold of it, like the sound, it really is over.
Exactly it.
And I just feel that's somehow, I guess that's my contribution to this.
No, I think that's good. I think that's a good way. Yeah, no, I think it's good. I mean, we're up here in the pod, it's not necessarily about going over everything he said. It's about developing, developing the points. And I think, you know, over the weeks and months, we'll do a bit more of that. But I think
I just couldn't do justice to everything Joe said. It was a stellar interview. He absolutely rocked it, and it was a great interview. Real pleasure to listen to. I'll be listening to it again. I think just for pleasure.
And I think,
do send him my regards, because I was impressed. Very impressed.
Nice. Okay then, Paul. Well, we'll leave it there for today, and I'll see you soon. Yeah, and
man.
And I think we're going to play out with one of the Joe's tunes anyway, coming up next.
I think it's the right thing to do.
Yeah, I think it definitely is. So thank you very much again to Joe, and hey, Paul, see you soon, man.
See you soon. Thanks a lot, Rob.
Okay, to play out the show today, we have a song by Joe Solo called No Pasaran, the Ballad of Jack Atkinson.
My name is Jack Atkinson, I'm not afraid, and I live and die by this vow that I've made. The only good fascist's a dead one, they say, and around the real we are. When I first left all them months ago, I told him I'd come not to kill but to cure. But for an ambulance driver my shot's pretty sure, and around the real we are. There'll be no pasaran, no pasaran, no pasaran today. The fascists have come for our freedom, and we ain't gonna give it away. There'll be no pasaran here today. I told my mother, now mother be strong, for the left way is right and the right way is wrong. And you can stick that on my grave when I'm gone, for I'm a real we are. There'll be no pasaran, no pasaran, no pasaran today. The fascists have come for our freedom, and we ain't gonna give it away. There'll be no pasaran here today. Cast may be cast, and the cast may be cast, but you armies of darkness, you best do your worst. 'Cause to win, yeah, well, you gotta get past us first, and around the real we are. There'll be no pasaran, no pasaran, no pasaran today. The fascists have come for our freedom, and we ain't gonna give it away. There'll be no pasaran here, no pasaran, no pasaran, no pasaran today. No pasaran, no pasaran, no pasaran today. No pasaran, no pasaran, no pasaran today. The fascists have come for our freedom, and we ain't gonna give it away. There'll be no pasaran here today.
We hope you enjoyed the show today. If you have something to say, or something to play, or just want to hear more of our podcasts, then you can get in contact with us at outa-space.com. That's OUTA-space.com. Okay, take care now.